Look at the physical scale of London's Barbican estate. It is a massive, highly calculated concrete footprint. Inside, you'll find these coffered waffle slab ceilings. The grid of square voids exists for a strict mathematical reason. Concrete near the middle of a thick slab does absolutely no structural work. It adds dead weight and cost without giving the building extra strength. So architects take it out. They remove it in a disciplined pattern, leaving behind ribs that span in two directions to carry the load. That famous geometric grid everyone admires is quite literally the shape of the concrete that is not there. Structural ornament is almost always the record of an absence. A lightning hole, a structural truss, a ceiling coffer. Each is a pattern defined entirely by material that was deliberately left out where it was doing the least. Now look at this interior from Miriam Howitt's late 1960s Barbican show homes. The Made X Barbican collection recently released a 23-piece furniture set that draws direct inspiration from this visual language, including a piece called the Coffer lamp. When you reproduce a coffered ceiling as a lamp, a mathematical error occurs. The sign flips. On the concrete slab, the shape marked material removed, a negative sign. On the light, it marks material added to recreate that visual shape, a positive sign. This creates an immediate operational cost for the designer. If a ceiling coffer is 180 millimeters deep because of physics, you can logically argue for bringing it down to 160 millimeters. But if the coffer on a lamp is deep simply because it looks like the Barbican ceiling, you lose your logical gradient. There is no criterion to follow, only visual resemblance. Turning a structural subtraction into a purely decorative addition traps a design. You end up with a form you cannot iterate or improve upon because you cannot logically explain why it exists in the first place. To see how functional design survives, we can test recent projects against a simple framework. Does the final form honestly record its physical constraints? Take Cobre Studios' table lamp C. It's cut and folded from a single 2mm steel sheet. The asymmetry reads as a stylistic gesture, but those exact folds are the only thing keeping the metal standing upright under its weight. Debray's Ramverk alu case has a completely plain exterior. That smooth surface is a direct consequence of 369 complex components and structural spines migrating inward for torsional rigidity, rather than a style applied over the top. Lincoln's 2027 Nautilus puts its panoramic display entirely at the base of the windshield. The design director stated clearly that the screen is positioned there so the driver's eye can stay on the road without refocusing. Because the physical constraint is stated, the decision is arguable and therefore improvable. The Eccentrica Diablo V12 Roadster displays the honest arithmetic of engineering. When you take the roof off a rigid car, the chassis weakens. You have to explicitly add heavy carbon fiber reinforcements back into the body to pay for the lost structure. In all these cases, the final object's physical form acts as a completely legible record of its own design process. The creators can logically justify every single millimeter of the result. Then we have the broken signs. These are the cases where designers treat structural absences as positive forms and strip away the context of why the shape was made. The Gunther Works GXR Evo and the Aston Martin Vallon both independently deleted their rear glass windows in favor of sweeping, solid shapes. Both teams described the new designs at length, but neither named the physical constraint that forced the driver to lose rear visibility. This diagram maps a product's iterative life cycle and shows exactly what happens when constraints are hidden. An aesthetic choice with no functional explanation creates a dead end. Designers get trapped in a loop of unexplainable choices, unable to iterate on a shape with no underlying logic. Look at the second branch. True structural constraint actually allows a product line to evolve. When physical rules are clear, the design can divide and multiply into new, optimized iterations over time. You see the dead end clearly in the Jaguar Type 01. The original concept car featured a structural spine made of real travertine and brass. By the time it reached production, that physical spine survived only as a hollow tonal palette and a brass-inspired finish. The visual architecture crossed over into the final product, but the physical substance did not. It became an empty quotation rather than a functional tool. This brings the problem squarely back to the concept phase. Copying a structural ornament as an addition stops an object from being able to explain how it is actually made. There is a cheap diagnostic test you can run right at the drafting table. For any distinctive feature on your object, you must ask what it marks. Is it a structural presence or a structural absence? Compare it to your inspiration. If the sign flipped from negative to positive, you are no longer designing, you are merely quoting. Quoting carries a permanent cost. You will never be able to logically explain why that feature should ever change, leaving the design paralyzed. Design decisions are cheap as a sketch, brutal once tooled. See every angle before you build. This is Depix Design Intelligence.